You've read the same paragraph 4 times now, and somehow nothing is landing. It's not that you're distracted. Your phone is in the other room. The house is quiet. Your eyes are moving across the words at a perfectly reasonable pace, left to right, line by line, exactly the way you've always read. And yet, an hour from now, if someone asked you what this page actually said, you'd have nothing, not a vague impression, nothing. You go back and read it a 5th time, a little slower, a little more annoyed at yourself, as if slowing down the same broken method will somehow fix it. It doesn't. You close the book or the laptop, and you start to wonder if you're just bad at this, getting worse at focusing, worse at retaining things, worse at the basic task of putting information into your brain and having it stay there. Here's the part almost no one tells you. The problem was never your attention. It was the method. So what if there's a faster way to actually learn something? Not by reading faster, but by reading completely differently. There's a tradition in Japanese craftsmanship that has almost nothing to do with school, and almost everything to do with how something actually gets absorbed into a person, permanently, instead of bouncing off the surface of their attention. It's not about working harder, or longer, or with more discipline gritted through gritted teeth. In traditional Japanese apprenticeships, a potter learning to throw clay, a chef learning to cut fish, speed is never the early goal. And yet, those who train this way often become faster, more capable learners than people optimizing for speed from day one. The secret isn't slower, it's narrower, and once you see why, you'll never read a page the same way again. And it starts with the single most wasted activity in all of learning. Chapter 1. Rereading is not studying. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Rereading something you don't understand feels like studying, but it almost never is. Your eyes move across the same words a second time, and your brain experiences something called the fluency illusion. The words feel more familiar the second time through, and that familiarity gets misread as understanding. You're not actually learning more. You're just recognizing the sentence structure you already saw a moment ago, which produces a comforting feeling of progress that has almost nothing to do with whether the information is now in your long-term memory. This is the single biggest time waster in learning anything. Not because rereading is evil, but because it feels productive while doing almost nothing. 4 passes over a page that don't involve active recall are, in terms of actual retention, barely better than 1 pass. You've spent 4 times the time for a fraction of the result, and the worst part is you walk away feeling like you studied. In traditional Japanese skill transmission, a technique is rarely just watched repeatedly. It's watched once, then immediately attempted, badly, at first, because the attempt itself is what actually builds the skill, not the watching. Passive repetition of input was never the mechanism. Active retrieval was. The simple thing to try today. After reading 1 paragraph, just one, close the book and say out loud, in your own words, what it said. Not perfectly, just attempt it. That 10-second attempt does more for retention than 3 more passive rereads ever will. What you do in the 60 seconds after you stop reading might matter more than anything that happens while you're reading at all. Chapter 2. The 60 seconds everyone skips. Right after you finish reading something, there's a tiny window, somewhere between 30 and 90 seconds, where your brain is still actively consolidating what just happened. Most people spend that window picking up their phone. This single habit might be the most expensive 60 seconds in modern learning. The brain needs a brief period without new competing input to begin moving information from short-term working memory into something more durable. Immediately flooding that window with a notification, a text, a different tab, doesn't just distract you from the next task, it actively interrupts the consolidation of the task you just finished, before it had a chance to settle. In many traditional Japanese training contexts, there's a built-in pause after any practiced action, a brief stillness, a small bow, a moment where nothing new is introduced. This isn't ceremony for its own sake. It's functional. It protects the short window where what was just practiced has a chance to actually take hold, uninterrupted. We tend to treat any pause as wasted time, something to fill immediately with the next input. But an unfilled 60 seconds after learning something is not empty time. It's the most productive 60 seconds in the entire process, and we routinely throw it away for a notification that could have waited. The takeaway: the next time you finish reading or practicing something, sit in silence for 60 real seconds before picking up your phone or moving to the next task. Time it if you have to. It will feel oddly long. That's the point. There's a deeper pattern about how much material to take in at once, and it's almost the opposite of what most learning advice tells you. Chapter 3. Less material, engaged with more. Most learning advice optimizes for coverage. Get through the chapter, finish the course, cover all the material before the test. Traditional skill transmission optimizes for something almost opposite, engaging deeply with a deliberately small amount of material, repeatedly, from multiple angles, before moving on. A traditional apprentice might spend weeks on a single cut, a single glaze technique, a single fold, not because the craft is simple, but because true competence with a small unit of skill transfers more reliably to everything built on top of it later. Skipping ahead through 10 techniques half-learned produces a shakier foundation than mastering 3 techniques completely, even though the second approach looks slower on a calendar. This reframes what fast actually means. 10 chapters skimmed once might feel faster because you covered more ground in the same number of hours. But if none of it sticks, you'll need to revisit all 10 chapters again later anyway, at which point, the faster first pass was actually slower once you count the repeat. 3 chapters engaged with deeply the first time often means never having to relearn them at all. The takeaway: instead of measuring progress by pages covered, try measuring it by whether you could teach what you just learned to someone else, right now, without looking. If you can't, you haven't actually finished that section yet, regardless of whether your eyes have technically passed over every word. Before I show you the habit that surprised me most, the one about spacing, not speed, let me tell you about something that has nothing to do with studying at all. Chapter 4. The gap is where the learning happens. There's a quiet idea, present in many traditional Japanese training rhythms, that the gap between practice sessions is not downtime. It's where a meaningful part of the actual learning takes place. A martial arts student doesn't drill a single technique for 6 straight hours and call it mastered. They practice it, stop, return the next day, and practice it again, and the return, after a gap, is treated as essential, not optional. The brain appears to do something during that gap, consolidating and slightly strengthening the memory, that simply doesn't happen if you only ever practice in one long, unbroken block. This directly contradicts a common Western study instinct, cramming a single subject for as many consecutive hours as possible right before it's needed, treating the marathon session itself as the learning. But research on spaced repetition consistently shows that the same total number of hours, spread across several sessions with gaps in between, produces dramatically better retention than one long, unbroken session, even though the long session feels more thorough while you're in it. The takeaway: instead of one 3-hour session on a topic, try 3 1-hour sessions, spread across 3 different days. It will feel less efficient in the moment, almost frustratingly so. The 2-week test will tell a different story than your in-the-moment feeling does. This next one is about something that happens in your body, not your mind, and it's easy to completely overlook. Chapter 5. Tired hands don't lie. In many traditional Japanese crafts, physical fatigue in the hands and body is treated as honest, useful feedback, not just something to push through. A potter's hands tiring at a certain point in a session is taken as real information about when the quality of the work is about to decline, not an obstacle to override with willpower. Applied to learning anything, reading, studying, practicing a skill, there's a parallel signal we usually ignore, a specific kind of mental fatigue, a foggy, going through the motions feeling that shows up well before you actually stop. Most people push through this fog because stopping feels like giving up. But the last 30 minutes of a foggy, exhausted study session usually produce close to nothing in terms of actual retention. You're moving your eyes across pages while your brain has functionally clocked out. This means the instinct to push through and finish often produces a worse outcome than stopping at the fog and resuming later, fresh. The hour spent foggy isn't extra progress, it's often closer to 0 progress, dressed up as effort. The takeaway: the next time you notice that foggy, going through the motions feeling while studying, treat it as real information, the same way a craftsman treats tired hands. Not a moral failing to push past, but a signal that this particular session has reached its useful limit, and the smarter move is to stop and return later. There's one more piece, and it's the part that ties the entire method together. Chapter 6. Speed was never the goal. It was the side effect. Here's the quiet truth underneath every habit in this video. Every one of them looks slower in the moment and produces faster actual learning, specifically because it eliminates the wasted hours spent redoing work that never stuck the first time. We tend to imagine fast learning as someone moving through material at high speed, eyes flying across pages, covering enormous ground in record time. But the truly fast learners and the traditional craft apprentices, generation after generation, usually look slow while they're working. They pause. They attempt recall instead of rereading. They engage with less material more completely instead of skimming more material once. The speed shows up later, in the test that doesn't require relearning, in the skill that doesn't need to be retaught, in the hours never spent redoing what was never properly learned the first time. This reframes the entire premise of learning faster. It was never about moving your eyes or your hands more quickly through the material in front of you. It was about making sure the first pass actually counts, so there never has to be a second, third, or fourth pass at all. The takeaway, and the one to carry forward. The next time you're tempted to measure your study session by how much ground you covered, measure it instead by how much you could explain without looking. The first number will always look more impressive in the moment. The second number is the only one that was ever actually real. You open the book again, a different day, a different page, and this time, you read only one paragraph before stopping. You close your eyes and say it back, out loud, in your own clumsy words. You get most of it. You sit in silence for 60 seconds after, resisting the pull toward your phone, and it feels strange, almost too long, the way anything unfamiliar feels too long at first. 3 days later, without rereading anything, you still remember the paragraph, clearly. The way you used to think only happened by accident. You're covering less ground in any single sitting than you used to. And somehow, for the first time in longer than you can remember, what you're covering is actually staying. Learning faster was never about moving through more material more quickly. It was about making the first pass count, so you never had to take a fifth one again. If this felt like something your learning needed to hear, there's more waiting for you here.